In this week's Torah portion of Lech Lecha, we already find that Abraham is engaged in conversation with the Almighty. He's telling him where to go, how to be, what to do. And the Maimonides, the Rambam, one of the greatest commentaries, points out and says that Abraham was not the first monotheist. He wasn't the first person to believe in one God. And Maimonides goes on to list various people, Adam and Noach and Chanoch, Metzushelach, and two fellows named Shem ve'Aver that had a yeshiva. And there were different people that believed in one God. And then Maimonides says that Abraham comes along and he calls him Amudo Shel Olam, the pillar of the world. And he busts up the idols. It's a famous story that Abraham's father, Terach, owned an idol store where you go to buy idols. And Avram understood that these idols just stood there and didn't really do anything. And so Avram went and broke up all the idols and left one very large idol there. And when Terach came the next day, he said, "What happened?" Abraham said, "Oh, he did it," and pointed to the idol because he had put the hammer in the idol's hand. And Terach said, "Silly boy, you know these idols can't do anything." Abraham said, "Exactly." Fairly precocious young man. And the Rambam says Abraham goes on to start Judaism. And the Ravid, one of the commentaries, there are many commentaries on Maimonides. The Ravid asks the following question. He says that Abraham wasn't the first monotheist, as we mentioned. There were two gentlemen named Shem ve'Aver that had a yeshiva. Yeshiva Shem ve'Aver. And they knew all about God. And he says, why didn't Shem ve'Aver bust up the idols, do something about the idols? And he gives an answer that many of the commentaries don't love. He says that maybe they didn't know about the idols, but it's hard to imagine. And the Kesef Mishnah, another commentary, gives a beautiful answer. He says, Shem ve'Aver had a yeshiva, it's true. And if you walked in the front door, you knew the secret handshake, the secret knock. You could go in, you could learn all about the Almighty, all about God. But if you didn't know what was going on inside, you could walk right past the front door and never be the wiser. And the Kesef Mishnah says, Avram comes along. And Avram stands on the rooftops and shouts that there's a God. And it mentions Nefesh Yasher Azu B'charon, that he got 100,000 people believing in God. Because he believed that religion, that the Jewish religion had to be one of reaching out to people, of explaining who and what God was, not insular like Shem ve'Aver. It's as if Judaism started and could have gone in two different directions. We could have been insular, had our own little country club of Shem ve'Aver, where we had a few people and we all knew about God and were loyal. Or it could have gone the direction of Abraham, to reach out to everyone around the world. And in fact, God chose Abraham's direction. And the question is why? Why did God choose to go in the direction of Abraham? And I always wondered about this question. And I used to do a lot of lobbying different places. I lobbied state lobbying in Albany, in New York, in the city of New York, in Washington. And on one of my trips, I was very friendly with faith-based lobbyists. They were lobbyists, the Catholics, the Mormons, different people. And I was talking to a Mormon friend of mine. I said, let me ask you a question. After high school, you send all of your children, your young men, your young women out to preach about the Mormon religion. They go everywhere in the world. I was on a flight recently to South Africa. I sat behind a very nice group of young men, white shirts, ties, glasses, had name tag, who were going to teach about the Mormon faith to folks in Africa. So I said, how successful are they? How many converts do they bring back? He said, you know the truth? He says, we don't really know. We don't know how many converts come back as a result. I said, you don't know? Where is your ROI, your return on investment? Right? You throw in millions of dollars and you don't know if you're successful? He says, oh no. we're successful. Because these young people that go out, they get challenged every day, many times a day, about their faith. And they get asked questions, hard questions. And when they come back to us, after a year or two, they come back stronger than ever. And I realized this was Abraham's point. Was that when one goes out to preach about God, we get questioned and we have to come up with answers, and there's an engagement, and we have to repeat our belief, and we internalize it, we become stronger. Abraham's Judaism is much stronger than Shem Ve'ever's. One would think if I just bunker down, I could be strong, but no. Being out there, talking about God, that's what makes us strong. I recall a story. I worked for NCSY in Detroit, and I used to, Friday nights, have something called an oneg. NCSY was for Jewish teenagers. And an oneg was where you'd have some food, some singing, someone would say some nice words of Torah. And there was a particular young man who came from a family that was very religious, and he had some real struggles. He just couldn't get himself in line with the faith. He was challenged. And so he had come to my house that night for the oneg. And we were talking back and forth. And I said, you see that young Jew over there? I said, that young Jew does not have to keep Shabbos. They're here because they want to be here. He said, well, why would they keep Shabbos? I said, why don't you ask them? He walks over to them, and he said right to their faces, why would you keep Shabbos? You don't have to. And they started to explain the beauty, what they saw in it. And it was amazing. He was transformed. He had heard a perspective he didn't get from his family or his friends or his rabbis, something totally new, and it spoke to his heart. And as he continued, and he wound up finding his way back to the faith and reaching out to others, it strengthened him tremendously. And this is the gift that God gives us, and this is the gift that Abraham identified. It is a gift that when we reach out, when we open up our hearts, when we wear our Judaism on our sleeve, we talk about how proud we are to be part and parcel and connected to the Almighty. That strengthens us here. Yes, we are an outreach religion. We reach out to people that know less than us. But they always help educate us. That's what Judaism is all about. It's about throwing open the doors to our homes and our synagogues. It's about throwing open our hearts to Jews out there and people around the world and talking about the Almighty and our belief in Him and our love for Him. When we practice that, when we make ourselves vulnerable and open up and talk to people, we come out so much stronger. We come out so much more loyal to the Almighty.